I'm building up wealth for my family. I can take them overseas once a year. I'm going to put my kids through a better school than what I was in. So I was looking at the intent of my decision all the time, and at the end of the day, rating myself as a father, I gave myself about 9 out of 10. How much do you think he gave me? Okay? So it happens. Customers out there judge you by your behavior, not by your intent. And your behavior, as it shows up in the market, is a function of your managerial processes and systems that you have in place to deliver something. All right? Let's look at the second. Let me just see whether I have actually said everything that I wanted to say. Yeah, there's just a slide that illustrates that we need both, the combination between management and leadership. That ultimately takes us to excellence, but they have distinct roles to play. Have a look at this. Causes of business failure. The research is a little bit old. It's about 7 years old. But there aren't research at the moment that states the contrary. So we stick to what we have. Can you see that managerial incompetence contributes most or takes the largest part in terms of contribution to reasons for business failure? Not leadership. Leadership second. 40%, ladies and gentlemen, of all businesses globally fail because of managerial incompetence. Right, that's a statistic, research done by Barnos. Let's look at the second concept, importance of management in bringing about and maintaining that competitive success through operational ability. Very quickly, a little bit of a rehash of what I just said. Let's just contextualize again. This slide, to explain it, don't get confused if the slide's too busy. There's your organization, there's Metropolitan. Spoken about the top part, bottom part. There's my customer over there, and there's my product. Okay? Depicted there as a triangle with a whole lot of attributes around it. Right at the top of that product is a promise. Now, the promise is the reason why the customer is coming to you. Now, does that promise in an organization, is it normally made by the intent part of the company or by the behavior part? Who makes the promise? Which of the two halves makes the promise? The top part. Now, who needs to make the promise happen? The bottom part. Okay? So don't underestimate the value and the importance of management in terms of maintaining, first and foremost, achieving that competitive advantage, but then also maintaining it. So, that's how that is aligned. Ultimately, if I keep my promise, the customer will come back. Now, what is Metropolitan's promise? Quality, price, service, trust. What is it? Rest assured, be assured. What is your promise to the market? Why would I make use of your products? Do you know? Very important that we know this. How would we find out if we're not sure? What's the most obvious thing to do? You're going to run to your manager and ask him? Who do you need to ask? Your mother? It should be in the company vision. It's depicted in the company vision. That's where it's worded. Now, what's important, ladies and gentlemen, this is what you need to see. That company vision there ultimately speaks to who? Yes, to people in the organization, but also to who? To the customer. So there needs to be an alignment in terms of what I do there so that I can make sure that I achieve that promise. The best example that I always use here is the one of the Titanic. About 90 years ago, ship went down, as you all know, because it struck an iceberg. Now, if you've been following the research, what is some of the other reasons why the ship sank? Who can tell me? Who follows that stuff? It's on National Geographic, and yes? It was traveling way too fast. It was traveling way too fast. Now, when the CEO of the company that built the Titanic, when he proclaimed that this ship will never sink, was that visionary? Was it visionary of him to say that? Do you think he was a leader at the time? Yes, of course. Well, it must have been. I mean, this was just after the First World War. I mean, for a ship to not sink was a pretty hefty statement to make. Where do you think things went wrong? Why did it go too fast?
He was chasing a deadline. He wanted to be in New York faster than any of the other ships.
Okay, so now, was it the leader of the company that was chasing that, or was it the manager of the ship? So it was asking for it to speed up. So what do you think? What should the manager have done there?
The systems we have don't suit that.
Right, the systems and the processes that we have don't suit that. It's very important. And that's the second part of this maintaining of the competitive edge, ladies and gentlemen. Management is not just managing the people that work next to you and under you. Management is also managing who? The leaders in the organization. Because they need to abide by the same processes and systems that you have in place. Otherwise, they can lead you straight into the iceberg. What else went wrong with the ship? Why else did it sink? Poor design. Okay, so here I go. I promised the ship isn't going to sink. And somewhere there, when the ship's being built, it's designed poorly. Now, what is that? Is that a leadership function or is it a management function? Management function. Okay, it should be a process, it should be a system in place to ensure that I don't have a poor design, even though it's hindsight. Did they use substandard material? Yes, they did. If you didn't follow the research, there's the metal that they used was a substandard material. Look, if you're going to go into icy waters, you're going to hit an iceberg, you build a ship so it can withstand it, okay? You don't count on luck, hoping that you're not going to hit the thing. You're going to hit the thing. It's the same with businesses today. Our environment contains icebergs, so we've got to make sure that our business models are resilient. Now, here's a key managerial lesson in that. Put yourself in that situation 90 years ago. You're the financial manager of the organization. I'm procuring the material and I'm coming to you and I'm putting in front of you the cost of the best possible material that there is. Now the manager, the financial manager, what do you think the financial manager is being measured upon? Cost. So the finance guy says, no, look, love to have it, but can't have it because I'm being measured on cost. Now have a look at the dichotomy here. In the process and systems, you as a manager need to make sure that your measurement is aligned towards that, achieving that. It should not be measured in silo. So you can't measure the financial manager on cost and then expect the outcome to be that. The two will contrast one another. Okay, so there's a message of alignment in that. Let me just have a look and see whether I've covered that important slide here. Sort of reiterating what I've said about the Titanic. Very quickly, Metropolitan, brand recognition. So I sit somewhere, watch a TV ad, see you advertise, decide, yes, I want to get one of your products. I like the company. I'm comfortable with the corporate identity. I go in, I phone up, or I come and see somebody, or somebody comes and sees me. There's a whole experience, and I'll buy whatever it is that I want to buy. And ultimately, at the end of the year, Metropolitan goes and they measure their market effectiveness, return on investment. Did we get new customers? Did we retain the old ones? Did we lose anybody? Now have a look at the middle block. Everything in terms of the marketing success there is an outcome of my supply chain or my operational efficiency. Can you see that? Marketing success is not a function of marketing. Do you agree? Disagree? Marketing success is a function of what? Of my operational ability. Agree? Not agree? Agree. How many times have you gone to a store where they advertised a bargain and then when you get there, they're out of stock? Now, is it the marketing department that took all the stock and hid it away somewhere? No, it's the planning department. They planned incorrectly. They don't have enough stock. Be that levels of communication and things that go wrong. The fact of the matter is, success ultimately is dependent on those operational processes. Third concept, plan for aggressive competitiveness, organize that, control and measure for it through aligning the managerial operational model, its processes and systems to your customers' expectations. Very quickly, this is what it looks like. If I take the bottom part of my circle, ladies and gentlemen, and I draw it differently, it'll look like this. I don't want you to get too bogged down on all the detail in the slide, but I do want you to take note that I have in the organization, from a planning, an organizing, and a controlling point of view, core business systems and support business systems. Core runs over here and primarily are outward directed. So they deliver whatever needs to be delivered to the customer. Over there I have support. They feed into the core to ultimately enhance the levels of delivery. So from a manager, it's very important that you understand on which one of these bands you operate. Do you operate on the core or do you operate on the support? Now, why would it be important for you to understand on which one of those bands you operate? What possible impact can that have on your managerial planning, controlling, and organizing? I will have different measures, first and foremost. In this instance, who is the customer? The core business system, other people in the organization. That's the customer. In that instance there, who's the customer? External customer. Okay, so it's very important from that perspective that I distinguish between my core and my support systems. Now, let's take Metropolitan again. Can you give me one of your systems and processes in operations which you regard as core? Anyone? Customer service offices. Okay, so infrastructure I have, I deliver customer service. Now, why would you consider that to be core? What gives you the indication that it's core?
It's a direct link to the customer.
Direct link to the customer. Okay, so now, who actually determines in an organization what needs to be the core system? Who determines it? The customer. So when we distinguish between core and support systems in the organization from a managerial perspective, we have to take that notion from the customer and backtrack. That's ultimately what we're serving. We're not serving the boss, the CEO, the leaders. We're not serving that. We take our cue from them in terms of driving the organization, influencing for behavior, as Andy referred to. But ultimately, the customer is the one that determines what that needs to look like. Okay? Right, and then very quickly, the fourth concept. I want to talk to you about this one very quickly. This is key, ladies and gentlemen. From a managerial perspective, it needs to be possible for me to integrate the movement of funds, information, products, and services. Dell was the first computer company in the 1980s that turned the computer industry on its head. Now, what it did is, at the time, the industry, to get economies of scale, to get cheap computers into the market, they worked on economies of scale. So IBM typically had long runs, long production runs, mass-produced product. That's where the discount sat. Because they worked on the principle that I do the product first, design it, then I put it on the market, and then I push it into the market, hoping that they would take it. Worked on forecasting, a little bit of foresight in a way. What Dell did is, Dell said, no, let me work with information first. Push the information out to the customer, get the information, also at the same time get the money from the customer, feed the information back to the supplier, then have the product made, shipped off to the customer. That enabled him to put a customized, affordable computer onto the market at a lower price than IBM. He was a student in his dorms. And all he did is he took those three pipelines and he just changed the sequence thereof. Now there's a valuable lesson there for us. Once again, in terms of the customer managing the organization. And that is that we have to start at the information. We have to start with the information, not with product design. Customer we're dealing with today, a little bit more about it later, but the customer that we're dealing with today, or the consumer, is not just a consumer anymore. They also want to be creators. Woolworths learned that lesson about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Did you follow the story? Took a magazine off the shelf. Man, they got a wave of complaints on the wall, on their wall. What should they have done? What would you have done? Ask him before the time. Tell them, hey boys, out there on Facebook or wherever you are, this is what we want to do. What do you think? Because then they feel a part of the decision. Then your wall doesn't need to be this one big excuse that you type out after having received all those complaints, and then going ahead and putting the magazine back onto the shelf, and anyway, 2 days later, you look like an idiot, with all due respect. Use the customer before the time. Again, it's a process that you can implement in terms of managerial controls. This thing has buzzed in my hand, which means I'm out of time. I get asked the question all the time whenever I do these talks. So, Stanley, you're going to talk on management planning, controlling, organizing, evaluating again. Are you going to again talk about that, the same old, same old? And my answer is always the same. As long as companies don't get it right, I'll keep on talking about it. I hope that I've helped you to think a little bit about these things. Thank you. I'll take some questions now. Please ask me something.
If you go back to that other slide where you had the CEO and the supporting and the core processes, and I think one of the challenges we face is that to get information from the customer, which would be right down here at the bottom in that picture, there are lots of different entities that want to talk and manage that information flow. And somewhere that's a challenge probably in our world, is how do we not pollute that information? It's like this gem that we could get from the coalface and make sure that it remains true through the organization.
Yeah, I think if I could add to the comment, one of the biggest challenges that we have in organizations, and I think there your organization is no different, is traditionally information used to sit there as a support function. It's seen as a support function because it's viewed as IT and systems, and it supports all the processes, and it synchronizes the processes or automates the processes. And what's actually happening, because of the consumer push, because of information, the Twitters, the Facebook, social status, all those type of things, we find that this support activity actually needs to be pushed into core. Now that has a number of implications for an organization, because first and foremost, the type of people that you probably in your HR department have employed over there, that the type of person is different from this type of person. Different skills, different qualities, different driver characteristics. To operate in support and operate in the core is very, very difficult. So what do I do with those people now? Do I get rid of them? Do I upskill them? Do I send them for training? It's very, 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 very challenging. But fortunately, unfortunately, organizations don't have a choice. The customer is pushing us into that. Information becomes first and foremost. Now, the interesting thing just on that, of course, is Dell taught us that lesson way back when in the 1980s already, and we're still struggling to get it right. But yeah, valid comment. Certainly very challenging. More.
It's not so much a question, but it's in terms of performance. If we look at the captain of the Titanic, when he got to New York and he was late, he would probably be seen as not a risk taker. So we wouldn't know that we had saved everybody's life, but he wouldn't have actually made the time. So how do we deal with expectations and
Okay, let me answer that. What was the expectation? What was the expectation? The ship mustn't sink. That was the prime objective. That was the promise. It's a very important comment that you make. A lot of times in organizations, we get swayed. We shift the focus. We start to focus on something else. Here's the Woolworths example again.